Hey everybody, hope you're well. Welcome back. Issue 264 of Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, introduced me to the character of the Owl. A supervillain, to be sure, but a character that I really, really rooted for in this comic. It was strange. Even back then, I remember thinking, I want the Owl to win in his battle against Daredevil, which is bizarre, but there you go. Um, he he's like in this comic book he looked like a dandified version of the Wolverine. He's got the claws, he's got the Wolverine hairstyle, but he also has a bow tie, a suit, and a cape. And for me, at that point, there was nothing cooler, to be completely honest. So even though I bought the book for Daredevil, I ended up liking the book because of the owl. So who would have thunk it? Um, it's a great book. It's a great book, and I will show you how great this book is as we go along. Now, to be fair, my perspective on this comic book has changed over the years. Not in relation to the entire book, but only in relation to the last page, last panel. Um, why it's changed, I will explain as I go along. But suffice to say, I still rooted, when I reread this book, I still rooted for the owl. I think the owl should have won the fight. I think that if he had won the fight, I would have felt better. I think the world would be a better place. But that obviously didn't happen because it's a Daredevil comic. And let's get on with the story. Now, the Owl has teamed up with a bunch of hooligan punk gang members to take over the drug operation of another rival gang. And the reason for that is because he wants to make lots of money through this drug peddling, so he can have wings grafted onto his body. He wants to fly. At the moment, he can only glide from great heights and land safely on the ground, but he can't actually fly, as in ascend upwards. These wings, however, will change everything, only if he can get the money. It's a real sort of it's a tale with a lot of heart. The owl has a lot to gain, but also a lot to lose. These punks basically think that the owl is a relic. They think he's a joke. They kind of question why they're even helping him. But the owl decides to teach them a lesson and show them who he really is. And how does he do that? He does that by jumping out of the helicopter and gliding beautifully and gracefully to the ground. And as you can see, these punks are duly impressed. As would I be. If I was a punk in a helicopter with the owl jumping out of the helicopter, I would be very, very impressed. And these people are. So that's a good start for the owl. Having taken in the sights of the city whilst gracefully gliding back to Earth, he's reunited with his pet owl, whose name I think is Owl, which keeps it nice and simple. And he discusses with Owl about the frailty of the human form. And who can blame him? Because truly, us human beings are quite frail. And the owl, the supervillain, not the pet, the owl wishes to transcend his current limitations as just a normal human being who can glide, and he feels that he can do this by becoming more owl-like, by getting these wings that will basically transform him into a proper human owl. The owl continues to share his dreams of the grafted wings, which will give him the ability to soar through the skies with the greatest of ease. And then he releases a mouse and commands his pet owl to go and get the mouse. At the same time, he flings his claws. I hope it wasn't at his pet owl, but it seems to be like he's throwing it at the pet owl. But the owl, the pet, not the person, manages to dodge the claws and at the same time catch the mouse. And it's it's a beautiful panel where the owl pet survives and comes and decides to take a perch on the claws. Very symbolic of what exactly I'm not sure, but a very symbolic panel. Elsewhere, a homeless man is talking to a baby about the virtues of living on the open road and the delicacies that you can find in garbage cans. Um, he finds a bag, a perfectly good bag that someone has left behind, and he decides to put the baby into this bag and then grabs the bag and starts walking. Who is this man and who is this baby? Is the baby the man's baby? Or did he find the baby? At this point, no one knows. But a very dramatic scene, a tragedy occurs. The bag with the baby is snatched from the man's hands, and obviously he's quite panicked at the prospect of losing this child. Yeah, like a bolt of lightning, Daredevil enters the scene, and he starts beating up on, I think it's the same person who ran off with the bag. And he says, with his hyper senses, he can smell there's a lot of cocaine in the air. He wants to know what's going on. At the same time, he can see, well, he can't see. He hears that the homeless chap is trying to check other people's bags. He's looking for the baby. Daredevil doesn't know that, tries to grab him. The homeless man says, "Listen, I'm trying to find my bag." Daredevil can sense that the homeless man is telling the truth, and so he lets him go. Suddenly, he is attacked by the Owl's gang members, and he disposes of them very, very efficiently and very, very quickly. But then he hears the sound of clapping and laughter. It is the owl perched upon the rooftop, uh, telling Daredevil that it's time that he took him down. And so he swoops down in a beautiful, beautiful sort of manner that only a character that looks like Wolverine can do. Claws outstretched, about to slash Daredevil. Daredevil, of course, dodges, but then it gets better. Now, Daredevil, being Daredevil, of course, manages to dodge, and the owl takes a step forward. Daredevil follows, but this is where the owl's beautiful powers of gliding really come into effect because he slows down his descent and he smashes Daredevil on the back. And he falls. Daredevil falls, and those same punks who were making a mockery of the owl earlier in the helicopter are now looking down, very very impressed, in awe, in fact, at this you know seemingly old man taking on a superhero half his age and slamming him to the ground. Because look at this panel. This is the owl beautifully, sort of like I would say in his element as a Wolverine lookalike uh, supervillain. It's a beautiful panel. It shows you what the owl is truly capable of. And you know what? If this if this comic book had ended right here, as this being the final panel, I think it would have been an absolute classic of our time. Of course, it doesn't end that way. There's more to follow. But I really wish that, I mean, even from Daredevil's perspective, Daredevil must realize that the owl is a middle-aged guy who's got issues, who's got problems. What the owl needs more than anything else, more than the wings that he's chasing, more than power, more than anything else, he just needs validation. The owl is obviously having a midlife crisis. He just wants to be able to show that I can beat a man half my age on my own steam. I don't need anyone else's help. And if Daredevil had just played along, if he just let the owl have his day in the sun, that might have been the end of the owl. Maybe this guy would have gone and joined a carpentry class somewhere, or opened a bar in Miami. Anything could have anything positive could have come out of this. But no, that's not what happened. And what happened next is I'm sure you can guess what happens next. In typical, I would say almost disappointing fashion, Daredevil somehow, despite being slammed to the floor really hard and having his back walloped in, he somehow manages to do his, martial arts stuff and start getting the upper hand. Um, Even now, I think in this panel, the owl looks magnificent. even up to this point, I am rooting for the owl to somehow make a comeback because you know what? He deserves it. He does. But Daredevil, being who he is, he just can't back down. And so he's fighting. He's fighting, the owl's fighting, Daredevil's fighting. We know where this is going to go. Eventually, there can be no doubt that Daredevil is the clear winner. Somehow, Daredevil has cheated. I don't know how, but that can be the only explanation because the owl is such a cool character that how can he be so easily bested, especially when he has claws and he can glide? But anyway, look, it happens. It happens. And so, in very classic supervillain fashion, the owl ejects his claws and aims it at the first innocent bystander, knowing full well, mind you, knowing full well that Daredevil will save the day by protecting that innocent bystander and being distracted long enough for the owl to make his escape. And I think this is a genius move on the part of the owl. Again, this is one of the reasons why I have rooted for this character. Not only does he look really cool, not only does he have his amazing supervillain powers, I love his name, the Owl, but also I think he's the thinking man's villain. He's strategic, and it works. As predicted, the Owl was correct. Daredevil does his thing. By the time he turns back around, the Owl is gone. Again, I think point one to the Owl for being so clever. But the story is not yet over because Daredevil can hear a heartbeat close by. He finds that heartbeat in a bag. When he opens up the bag, it is a baby. And Daredevil questions the chap who was carrying the bag, and anyhow, yeah, the baby is found. So things are looking up. Things are looking good. Now, I mentioned earlier that my perspective on this comic book had changed somewhat through my earlier reading when I was a kid to now, when I've recently rediscovered this comic book. And it's not in relation to my support of the owl. I still support the owl. I still believe that the owl should have won in this comic book. I still think he's a great character, and I think that this comic book gave him a very, very hard time. Where my perspective has changed is in relation to this last page, where we find that homeless man lamenting the loss of this child and thinking that he's never going to see the child again. And yet, when he turns around, Daredevil is there, basically holding the child, which he passes back to the homeless man, and the homeless man, is very grateful. Daredevil, to be fair, does say that, I should report this to the authorities. Are you the father? Who the hell are you, man? Why is this child with you? But the homeless man manages to persuade Daredevil with his honesty and his charm that the child should remain with him, and Daredevil agrees. Now, when I was a kid, I thought to myself, "Wow, what a guy! That's great." That's the redeeming feature of Daredevil in this comic. Even though I hate him for beating the owl, at least he left this child with this homeless man so that they could be a family. You know, the child would have a beautiful, wonderful future living with this guy on the streets. And that was my child mind. My adult mind is thinking, what the hell just happened? I mean, you've just handed over a child whose identity is unknown to you to a man whose identity is unknown to you. They're clearly not related. You're leaving this child on the streets where there's cocaine and muggers and wild animals, and the food that these people are going to be eating is questionable. It's you know a child has needs. It needs nourishment. It needs support beyond just what the street has to offer in the trash cans. It, this is the weirdest ending of any superhero comic that I've ever read. But again, as a child, I loved it. Now, as an adult, I'm thinking, what was the writer thinking? What is Daredevil thinking in this final panel? Um, so yeah, I I don't know what else to say beyond the fact that this was a very strange ending to a very strange book, but a book that I thoroughly enjoyed when I was a kid, and a book that I think I've continued to enjoy in my numerous readings, including now when I've recently reread this book. The ending, uh, I'm going to pretend, I'm going to imagine a good future for the child. Not the future, not the kind of future where, at the age of 5 or 6, he becomes a drug mule for a local gang. The homeless man is killed off or becomes a drug addict himself. That's not the future I'm going to imagine. I'm going to imagine that the homeless man somehow becomes a big tech boss. They buy a mansion. The kid grows up, marries, has kids, and looks after the old man until his death, and then inherits a large fortune. That's the version that I'm going to go with. And with that, guys, I just want to thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this comic book as much as I enjoyed it, and I hope that you'll now have some appreciation for this beautiful character, the owl, who I think really hasn't been afforded the limelight that he deserves. I love underdogs, I really do, and I think that the owl is one of the most prominent underdogs out there. Um, Thank you for listening to me. My ramble is now over. I really appreciate your time. As ever, like and subscribe if you will. And I really hope to see you in the next one.